to the popularity, due to the popularity of this event, we will be recording it. That was great timing. Thank you so much. And although we encourage you to keep your cameras on during the discussion portion of the event, we totally understand if you would like to keep it off to maintain some anonymity. Um, so I guess I'll go ahead. I'll introduce myself. You're probably like, who is this person who's been talking at me since I joined this call? I'm Lauren Morales. I am the program manager for the Harvesting Your Potential program here at WFAN. Um, so what the Harvesting Our Potential mentorship program is a mentorship program that matches new and beginning women and gender nonconforming farmers up with more experienced farmers to learn the trade, maybe learn a new skill in farming, or to see if farming is for them. So it either allows you to really get um, deeper into the farming field or, you know, figure out if it's for you or not. Um, okay, we have a few other WFAN staff joining us this evening. If you guys want to go ahead and give a wave so people know who you are. They'll be around to help answer questions or, help with any sort of like tech support needs. If you need anything, feel free to give one of them a message. Um, if we have any other HOP mentors joining us this evening, I'd really love for you guys to like do a little hand raise or wave as well so people know who you are. And we also have three amazing panelists this evening who will introduce themselves in just a moment. They can go ahead and wave as well if they'd like, so people know who they are before they go ahead and introduce themselves. They will be here to assist with leading discussion and answering questions during the discussion portion of this event. Um, and also, we have a couple people we'd also like to give some recognition to who will be on this call this evening as well. And those are some folks joining us from the Farmers Land Trust, who are working on a land transition project in Ohio in collaboration with a former HOP mentor, Annie Warmke. This project is called the Blue Rock Farmland Commons, and we hope to hear from them during the discussion portion of the event. But for now, we just invite them to, put up a hand or wave as well. So during the discussion portion, which will happen here momentarily, we encourage people to use the hand raise function on Zoom. That way, it can be kind of a fair way to figure out who's going to speak next. And that way folks aren't talking over each other. It's kind of hard on Zoom, to gauge like who's speaking. And, I think the hand raise thing will just make things a little more organized. You can also utilize the chat at any time to ask any questions that you have. We'll promise to try and get to not every question, but as many questions as we can. There's quite a few people joining the call this evening. If you feel comfortable having your camera on at any point, please feel free. We think that it really, encourages community to have your camera on during virtual events, but we also understand if you're not comfortable. All right, so let's go through our agenda really quick here. We just went through our intro and our welcome. We're going to have our panelists introduce themselves here after I do the community guidelines. And those are just things, they kind of are expectations of how people conduct themselves throughout the event. After the panelists introduce themselves, we will jump right into that discussion about land transition and access. So let's go through those community agreements real quick. Oh, I forgot to mention, after discussion, we'll have a brief evaluation for you to fill out if you feel like you want to. Also not necessary, but it really helps us maintain funding for this program, so we'd appreciate it. So our community agreements here, one person speaking at a time, that's just good manners in my opinion, but we do prefer that just one person speak at a time. No one knows everything. Together we know a lot. Or sorry, no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. In, any conversation, We know that each person is coming to that conversation with things that they know, and others are also coming with other information. So together, we all know a ton of stuff. Um, move up, move up. If you don't tend to speak a lot, we do encourage you to take this as an opportunity to maybe have your voice heard. And if you do tend to take up a lot of space with speaking, maybe take a back seat for a minute. You can still speak, but give other people a chance as well. Um, we can't all be articulate all the time. We want everyone to feel comfortable participating. If you feel like you don't have the words, it's totally okay to do your best. And as we were talking about before this call started, mistakes are cool. It's okay to make mistakes, but just do your best. That's all we ask. Um, Center a culture of care. So this is a space to lift each other up. And we want it to be a comfortable space, safe space for everyone. And be an active inquiry. So, be an active inquiry about how your identities and positions within hierarchies of privilege impact, influence, and influences collective space. So let's just, yeah, keep all of that in mind. Um, we will now jump into our panelist introductions. I will go ahead and have Sam go first, and then Hannah, and then Tig.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam. I'm in Northeast Ohio, outside of the Akron-Canton line beneath Cleveland. I'm a native Northeast Ohioan, and I'm going to tell you the story of Blue Rock and my land journey because they're very interwoven at this point, which is very interesting. I'm actually really honored to be the one telling the story of Blue Rock because we have Annie, the founder of Blue Rock, with us. And so it's partly her story, but it's also partly my story. And it's now also partly Kristina's story and Hannah's story and Tig's story, and hopefully all of your story very soon. I was on the periphery of this project for a while, and all of a sudden I got sucked in. It's very easy to get drawn into this kind of project. A little history on me. My ancestors, my grandparents, my uncles, my cousins, all farm in North Central Ohio, monoculture, corn, soy. They used to do dairy and eggs until they went under. I grew up doing 4-H, doing lambs for market, for sale after the fair every year. But I really didn't have any interest in continuing that farming, that kind of farming. So I went to the College of Worcester in Ohio, Central Ohio, and that was where I first heard about Blue Rock Station and like all the sustainability, like college, chatter about what's hot in sustainability. And Blue Rock came up as a really cool building. And they gave tours and it sounded really cool. It wasn't that far away, but I was really cheap college kid, and $50 for a tour. I don't know if it was 50 or 20, but whatever it was, it scared me off as a college kid. And I never went to go visit. That was in 2010. 13 years later, I drove out to a WFAN conference to go visit a friend who lives in Washington, but she was going to be in Iowa and I really wanted to see her. So I drove the 2 days it takes. Halfway there, I stopped at Tig's house and I spent the night because it was a 2-day drive. That was on my way to my first WFAN conference. And I was so happy to come back and debrief everything that I heard and saw. And I'm sure I talked about Kristina almost nonstop on the visit on the way home. It was very fun. Tig had just interviewed me for their research, for their academic program. And was it a PhD? I don't want to like downplay that too hard. Yeah, okay, it was a PhD. All right, cool. I'll leave that story to you. We had just met at the Queer Farmer Convergence, which Hannah really started that movement, and it got picked up in the Great Lakes area. So that's where I got to get involved in the Queer Farmer Convergence and Network. So when I was in Iowa for that WFAN conference, that was the first time I met Kristina and heard her pitch. And it's an incredible model that the Farmland Commons has. I came to the conference having just bought my own 13 acres to start my own orchard. And we had to go the conventional route. Like we were living in Cleveland, trying to find help and support, the nonprofits, government service, whatever. We didn't find anything that was economically made sense for us. We didn't want a higher interest rate on our mortgage. So we just kind of went the conventional route and bought. We lucked out. It's a great place. I'm very happy here, but I wish I had had the help and the kind of encouragement and the ideas and the we can do this if we just brainstorm a little harder together that Kristina gave me. And I was so inspired. I was like, we got to keep in touch. So I came back home. I joined the WFAN board that, December, whatever later. And it was January 2024. I had to look up the date that WFAN had a land access webinar that Hannah and Kristina were presenting at. And at that, Annie, I believe I'm getting this story right, and correct me if I'm wrong later. I think that was the first time Annie heard the pitch of the Farmers Land Trust and what they do. And she got so inspired that she reached out, and they had been talking. And then the following year it was just a few months later, I think, the conference where my employer is the Ohio Organic Certifier, OFA. And we have a conference, and they came up to me and they were like, Sam, we're going to do this thing about land transfer. Do you want to join? And I was like, yep. I don't know what I'm signing up for, but yes, because I fully believe in equitable land transfer and understood the model that Kristina presented, which I'll talk a little bit about, but not too much because there's so much great context on it that Kristina and Ian have already put out. Let's see where it goes. So ever since I said yes, we've been writing the bylaws for the Blue Rock Farm Commons. And I'll just talk about the model. So when 3 or more nonprofits like each other very much, they get together and they have the option of creating a 501c25. And this 501c25 needs to have representatives from all of the 501c3s who support this entity, and this entity can hold land. And that's about all it can do, which is perfect. It's an existing tax entity, but we're using it for a slightly more creative purpose, which is the land, you can lease it and you can set the terms to the lease because the board owns the land. This 501c25 can buy or receive donations of land and then identify someone to give a lease to, or vice versa. Someone who wants to farm can go to the Farmers Land Trust and they will help identify this kind of, see if it'll work. It's not a model that works for everyone, but it's a really cool model that doesn't have to involve the massive amount of capital involved in asset transfer. So you can, because it's a land donation, the entity can receive the land at whatever price is agreed upon. It could be free, it could be taxes only, it could be a nominal purchase. But then the board has the option to go ahead and lease that land out to a new farmer with almost no, you just got to pay taxes and insurance, and you basically get it almost rent free. And that puts such a lesser pressure on the farmers who are there. So the new Blue Rock Farmland Commons, we've the Blue Rock, the OG people identified someone to receive and become the tenant of the land. And it's I'll just read what I wrote. Scarcity around land, especially farmland, can feel like it's actually a precarious thing to be trying something new and different without significant legal precedent. Ownership is an idea that I cling to when I'm scared, for sure, but the safety it affords me is as much an illusion as the ownership is. My real safety lies in community and the diversity of people I can be in different kinds of relationships with, where we all help each other reciprocally. I know I'll get something back from my service on this board, but it's not at all about that. I want this model to succeed because it should, because it deserves an actual shot to be realized, and it's a real potential stepping stone into a new future.
Thanks, Sam. I guess I'll introduce myself next, if that's okay. Um, so my name's Hannah Breckbill. I farm with Humble Hands Harvest here in Decorah, Iowa, northeast corner of Iowa. And my story, just in brief, I am a first generation farmer. I came from a non-farming background, and I started by renting land, and 4 years into renting, I had the opportunity to own land. And that is because a group of people um, collectively bought a 22-acre piece of corn ground because they didn't want to see a CAFO on it, a confined feeding operation. So because of that group of people kind of diving in to protect the land and me being in the right place at the right time, I was able to buy that land from them kind of share by share of their collective ownership. Um, and so that's one story that's a really great story, and we're trying to replicate that now using a real estate investment cooperative that's focused on farmland and trying to take farmland from the current use or that might be subject to neglect or consolidation and get it into the hands of community members who then can transfer it to farmers. So that cooperative effort that's just in its beginning stages is called the Farmers Land Investment Co-op. And I will write uh, the URL for that in the chat. But yeah, I just to say why I'm here. Um, I feel like because of my land access story and my land access journey, I feel really strongly about people being able to get on land. And I feel really strongly that the beginning farmers shouldn't be shouldering the whole capital burden for the entire food system, right? And so I think communities need to be involved in deciding how their farmland gets allocated and used. And so that's kind of a big grounding thing for me. And then meanwhile, I'm in kind of the early mid-career of my life. So I'm not thinking about transition yet, but I know that I have to think about what I want to happen with my land and create structures so that after I'm gone, after I want to retire, whatever it is, my land can continue to produce food for this community. Um, and so, yeah, right now my farm is structured as a worker-owned co-op, and the worker-owned co-op, the business owns the farmland and owns the house. And that means actually that I have a lot more freedom to come in and get out of the business than if I owned any of that individually. So those are some thoughts that I have. I love a cooperative, so I'm happy to talk about that and excited for the rest of this conversation.
They all round us out here. Thanks so much, Sam and Hannah, for sharing your stories. And thanks, yeah, Sam, I'm just like reflecting on all of the relationships that you and like the threads that have brought us here together today. And yeah, just like feeling really like a lot of gratitude for the ways that these paths and connections can still happen down the road. So I'm Tig. I also go by Taylor. Either one is great with me. I use they them pronouns. I am currently living and farming on traditionally Potawatomi land in the Southwest Michigan, Northwest Indiana area. Um, I I grew up in Iowa. I grew up in a farming family. My grandpa farmed corn and soy for many years. Is still farming corn and soy in some capacity, and had a hog operation for a long time. So farming was farming in that sense was not very new to me. But I, yeah, never really had a sense that it was a career that I was interested in or was available to me until I started. It was my first summer in college. And I started working on a CSA veggie farm, and absolutely fell in love with farming. Not so much vegetable farming, but farming in general. Things really clicked for me a few years later when I started milking goats, and just had this like very deep sense that that's what I wanted to be doing. But also had a sense that that was not like a financially viable career for me at that point. So I took a little bit of a detour into academia. I am rounding out my 5th year of my PhD program this year in sociology. But over the last couple years, as I have done my dissertation work and have like traveled all over the Midwest talking to folks like Sam, I knew that I was not going to be in academia for much longer. I knew that I wanted to be back on the land, working with other queer folks, working with animals. And so, um, simultaneously, while doing this PhD program, I've landed myself in this funny situation where I work full time for one farm and am now in the middle of a land transition with another farm that's about 10 minutes away. So in my day job, I work at a multi-species livestock farm. We just opened a farmstead creamery last year, so I'm working in the goat dairy and the creamery, milking our herd of goats and making farmstead cheeses. um it's something that I love a lot, and it's also something that made me realize that like I don't actually want to own my own farm. I don't want to have my own operation. And at the same time, I also had a sense that I wanted to be doing more than like just production farming. So my farm manager at my day job, Molly, had introduced me to this couple that she was friends with. They were good friends of the farm. Gail and Melissa are their names, and they have for just over a decade now been running a small sustainable farm that they have used as an opportunity for youth education. Melissa is an elementary special ed teacher, and Gail comes from a pastoring background. And the two of them started this farm back in 2014 to be able to introduce kids to the work of farming at a very young age. It's something that I really wish I had had when I was a kid, and had an opportunity to understand farming beyond this sort of monoculture industrial kind of view of food production. And so Gail and Melissa and I, for the last 2 years, have been working on transitioning this land and this organization over to my leadership. Um, and I would say we're still like, despite being 2 years in, I feel like we're still in the very early phases of this transition. I'm happy to talk more about the specifics because it is like a strange circumstance to be in. But the gist of it is that the farm, Come and See Farm is the name, is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that Gail and Melissa are the directors of. The land is still owned by Melissa's mom. It's been in Melissa's family for a couple generations now. But Melissa's mom and Come and See Farm have a land contract, an active land contract, so that the organization can purchase the land from Melissa's mom. So once the land contract is paid off, the land will be held by the 501(c)(3) organization, which will at some point be directed by this group of all four of us, my wife, and then me and Gail and Melissa. And so that has been, it's been interesting to sort of navigate this land transition at the same time as also farming on another person's farm. And I think it was maybe Christina or somewhere on the Farmers Land Trust, somebody had made this distinction between land access and land security and land tenure, which I think is something that I am like, you know, I know about, but I feel like I'm living that in a way that feels so much more immediate to me, and feeling like, yeah, I do have access to land to farm on. I started a rotational grazing program at Come and See this year, with a small herd of goats and a small flock of sheep. And I'm given a lot of direction over management of the land and management of programming. But at the same time, there's a big question of how to pay off this land contract and how to really like secure access to this land in the long term. So that's a little bit about my story. Yeah, and I'm just really thrilled to be here among such good company and having these conversations together.
All right. Thank you so much, panelists, for those great introductions. We're gonna open up the floor to discussion now. Does anybody have like a question or anything they want to bring up to get our conversation started? Okay, Lori, go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Lori Cox. I have Roots Return Heritage Farm. I'm in a 7-county metro area here, actually in Minnesota. I'm in the southwest of Minneapolis. And I am coming to the end of my farm here. I've only been here for 11 years, but I have a teenager who's going to be a senior next year. And I'm trying to think for the next 5 years out, actually. And all of this discussion about differences between co-op and C25, which is the first time I've really heard it explained, the C25, and even more of a cooperative way I rent currently. I am trying to figure out, is there a way that we almost go through ourselves as owners and who wish to transition at some point? Do we go through a checklist or group of people that help us through this? I'm having a little bit of a hard time in Minnesota myself trying to figure this out. So just kind of opening it up there. Thank you so much for doing this.
So Lori, Annie Warmke here. Just to say, I'd be really happy to mentor you and help you with some of that decision making, because my process of the transition of Blue Rock Station to Blue Rock Farmland Trust really started before COVID, when I first met Ian McSweeney. And then, of course, I was revisited with Christina in the WFAN webinar, which brought it all home. But it's a long process, and I have, I think, a really good model of how to utilize the Farmland Trust process, but also it's much more than that, because it's psychological, it's physical. And so I did things like I created a booklet for each of the families I vetted. And some of my former interns, and Sam Tenenbaum was with us, and Christina was there one time when we met with potential farmers and their families. But I have a really great, a lot of really great professional people that I've worked with accounting and lawyers, and certainly our appraiser who does unique buildings, because we have a house made, all of our buildings are made pretty much from trash. And so getting a really good appraisal was also a challenge. But all of that, then there's the emotional stuff of letting go and getting rid of, and also where do you go? I had already organized where I was going, although I didn't think I was ever going there. I thought I would die at the farm. And so that's been really challenging for me emotionally to let go, because I am the farmer. I was smart. Well, I'm smart in some things anyway, but I was smart. A few years ago, I said to my husband, you know, someday I might need to leave here, but I'll never stop being a farmer. So I want to separate, or we might decide to sell Blue Rock Station as a business. It's worth a lot of money. And then I still would want to be farming. So I'm formed a Warmke Farm, which is my husband's name. I'm a feminist and I have never used a man's name, but I loved his name and I really didn't like mine much. So Warmke Farm, I find it feels very nice. Annie Warmke. When you say my name, I feel like you're hugging me. Anyway, so Warmke Farm LLC, and I had been transitioning into food forest garden and food forest development. And that was really a gift because when I ended up coming to a town of 15,000, I was able to transition, and it's just happened. I just have been full-time here since August 22nd, but I was building up this plot of land in town to become a food forest garden. And so I had something to come to. I had something that felt familiar. I spent my entire fall, it's driven me crazy, doing all the things I would have done on the farm, only a little bit differently and a smaller scale, but a huge amount of interest from people and especially young girls. So I have a lot of cool things I'm going to develop here. It doesn't change the grief. My husband calls it my happy grief because I am happy to be here and I'm really happy to be with my husband and my dog is here, but I'm super sad still. It's very hard. I mean, I'm talking about it fine right now, but right on the edge of I could cry. So it's just letting go, was everything to me. I was walking there my whole life. So, but things happen. I had a horrible accident on another farm. I had to learn to walk again. So I had to get rid of what was going to demand too much of me. But I'm happy to help, or anybody else that wants to maybe form a little group and we could talk periodically, but I'm super available. And also I would say Christina and Ian are the best two people you could ever go through a process with where you have to let it go of something that you really deeply care about and also work the best possible deal. I'm also lucky in that I had a women's fund that I started a long time ago in 98, and we've revitalized it, recharged it with some of our former interns being on the board so we could have representation with this 50C25. And so I'm not on the board. I don't want to be on the board, but I was involved in all of the development of the legal documents and the policies and the mission and all that kind of stuff. And I am involved with the new farmer family. I've been involved with the kids. I have taken them to do some things in town and get used to, a few things. They live up quite a ways from me now. So I'm just trying to make my own handoff be as not as painful as it has been. So anyway,
I'd love to step in and share a few resources that I'm aware of in Minnesota, or nearby anyway. So I'm a land access navigator with Practical Farmers of Iowa, but Renewing the Countryside in Minnesota, as well as the Land Stewardship Project, have people who are working on land transitions. And I'd especially recommend reaching out to the Land Stewardship Project for great people who will kind of, because what you need in a land transition process, I hear you like wishing for a checklist, and the problem is there isn't one. We are all kind of making it up as we go, and so each individual model has maybe a checklist, but you have to figure out what model you want to be part of. And so I recommend finding someone with some expertise who can just sit with you and figure it out.
All right. Do we have another question or okay, Yvette, it looks like you have your mic off. Go for it.
Thanks. Regarding the model where one share at a time was bought or is being bought. Um, can you explain a little bit more around that? Or yeah, I just wish I had like a flow chart or something.
Yeah. I'll try to explain it. Basically, this group that bought 22 acres of land bought it. They formed an LLC and then they all put in money that was equivalent to about a half an acre of the land that they bought. Each share was equivalent to that. And so different people had different amounts of shares. But then when I got involved, I was able to basically my task was to convince the group that uh that it's a good idea for them to sell to me. And then what they did, actually before I started any kind of convincing, what they did was they agreed with each other that they weren't going to speculate on the value of the land. They were going to sell their shares for the same price that they bought them for, which is a like deeply radical thing to do. And so that what that meant was that I was able to, over the course of 9 years, buy shares for the same price that they were in 2014 of this land. And I was able to do it kind of on my schedule. Like when I had the money, I said, I have more money. I can buy a couple more shares. Who wants to sell them to me now? So it was a really, really great, really easeful transition. They kind of all knew that they were going to, and they were just holding on to the capital until I was ready to buy it from them.
So did you say that each one of them originally bought a half acre, or they all together bought only a half acre?
Altogether, they bought 22 acres.
Oh,
And
okay.
each share of this LLC that owned the land was worth the value of a half acre. So no one individually had a specific half acre, but it was a collective ownership of 22 acres.
And is there a name for the practice where people transfer their shares to you at the value they paid, or no?
No, we made that up.
Cool. I like it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Wanted to add one more thing, Lori, in case this is of interest, but one of the real important selling points for me in entering into this process was the fact that the family that comes to be on the farm, and it could be more than one family, but the people who come enter the land with no debt. They have the ability to make money. 70% of the land must always be agricultural use, but they also have the ability to make money. They can sell the buildings, they can sell the lease, it's 99 years. They can, and this is where we felt really was important, generational wealth to pass on to their children. And they also have the support of a community of other commons farms that will come together and enable support. So there'll be some money that will be paid, like if you have profit, well, hopefully not if, when you have profit, a small percentage of that the farmer will agree upon with the lease agreement. That will come into like a pot. So if you got hurt or you wanted to build a new barn or create a campground and you need some cash or whatever, or help, physical help, you would have that kind of support, which we never had any of that. We were just inventing it as we went along. So I think it's a really great process, but it's also tailored to you and what you want it to end up to be. It isn't a formula other than the farmer comes onto the land with no debt.
Thank you so much, Annie, for all your contributions to this conversation, and I really appreciate it. In the spirit of, you know, like we have a limited amount of time left here tonight, I think we have about 12 minutes or less left for the conversation. So if anyone else has any conversations or anything they'd like to, or sorry, questions or anything else they'd like to add, please feel free to do so. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand or put it in the chat. We'd love to hear from some other people this night as well.
I have a question if nobody else does. I'm not sure if the raise hand feature is available or I don't see it.
If you go to the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see a little heart with the word react. And if you click on it, there'll be a raise hand option second from the bottom.
Okay. So I'll defer to that just in case I jumped somebody else who had a question.
No, the floor is yours. Go for it.
Okay, great. So land succession is an extremely important conversation, and I'm glad that WeFan is uplifting that conversation. I work on with heirs property and trying to support other Black agrarians to stay on their family land. That's been my journey. I worked in food and land for about 12 years now. And in 2022, I moved back to our family land. It's been in our family for over 150 years. It's a very long time for a Black family to be on land for that long. And so when it comes to heirs property, we're confronted with a lot of different issues, not having the capital that traditional farmers have. This is not a private land ownership situation. It is lands in common with family members. But of course, as many of us on this call know, most people are not going into farming, but people want to hold on to their land. And what we're finding in our community, our small community here, is that, of course, land is transitioning like it is in many spaces. So we're losing land extremely rapidly. You know, families who had land for over 100 years are deciding to sell. And a lot of times in heirs property situations, we get undersold and not sold at value. And so I was just wondering, my question to just jump to that is, are there organizations doing the work that I heard some of the panelists speak to, specifically trying to support folks who want to transition, maybe that's their option with heirs property, for them to be able to sell their land at a decent value and then also put farmers back on that land, something similar that I heard some folks talk about on the panel. I think that would be amazing. We were really fortunate. My mom and I were able to steward 200 acres of land here. It's not easy, but sometimes the easy option, the most immediate, efficient option for families is to just sell. So we've lost 200 acres here, 50 acres here, and they're getting subdivided. We don't know what's coming next in our community. So there's a lot of loss, cultural loss, of course, farming land loss. So anyway, I just wanted to have those conversations specifically in the realm of heirs property come up in some of the spaces y'all have been in.
Any of our panelists want to tackle that one, or do we have anyone else on the call who can add some or offer some answers or advice?
It looks like Bonnie put in the chat that they are a certified farm succession coordinator. Bonnie, would you like to say anything else or just keep it on the chat?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Sorry, I had trouble getting my mic turned on there. Hi, yeah, I just wanted to put a plug out there. I don't want to bogart the session. I'm really enjoying the conversation. But I am starting to offer consultation with farm transition planning. If people are looking for more in-depth help with that, definitely feel free to reach out to me. And my email is in the chat. Regarding heirs property, that's one area that I don't actually have a lot of experience in, so I can't help there. Sorry.
It looks like Meg has a hand raised, but real quick, Meg, sorry. I'm pretty sure your name is pronounced Selena, who was just speaking. It looks like there's a few different people popping up in the chat with some resources or might be able to help you. So if you want to take a look at those, it'd be like a great place to start, I think. And I'm gonna hand it over to Meg to speak.
Yeah, Meg Stratton. I am coming from the National Family Farm Coalition, which WFAN is a member of, and heirs property. The chat people are putting Raffi and the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Federation of Southern Cooperatives.
I think Meg froze. Hopefully she unfreezes here in a second.
Yeah, if she stays frozen, I can jump in. Federation of Southern Cooperatives is another one of the members of the National Family Farm Coalition, and they specifically work with Black families in the South. So just want to flag them as a potential resource.
Yeah, and I'll just say that like I think a huge issue is that question of like getting land, getting paid for the land at the value that the land actually is, but then also getting a farmer on it at a value that they can afford is like super basically impossible unless you have some kind of outside input from something. And yeah, so in my context, I'm trying to organize community to actually put that value in so that our community can be better and have a better, more whole food system. And I think there are a lot of other options, depending on what your goals are and where you are, to like figure out what's going to bridge that gap between what's fair to the person who has owned the land or the people who have owned the land and what's fair to a farmer trying to get started.
I'll also call it, we have a couple questions in the chat too that I don't think we've addressed. So Jane had the question, can a portion of a farm be a part of this process, or must it be the entire property? And then the other question that we've got is, are there any recommendations on transitioning land to an individual, family, or group that is not yet local, and how to navigate that trust building remotely? So let's start with the, can you do a portion of it? Yeah, Meg, just I did support jump in and plug that too in the chat there. All right, so the first question, can you do the transition with just a portion of the land? I'm going to assume the answer is yes, but I defer to the experts.
For the 501c25, pretty sure yes. I can't imagine a reason not to without like knowing the details of deeds or the local land laws.
Yeah, I agree. Like you can figure out a model that can work for a portion of some land that you own, and then you can continue to own the rest, or you can go bigger and try to do the whole thing or whatever. There's, yeah, as many options as there are pieces of land.
And then the other question around transitioning land to a group that's not yet local. So I don't know if this is true in the case of Blue Arc Commons. Was the family that the land was transitioned to a local one, or was there like an appeal and a relationship building that needed to happen?
They had a lot of, I think one of them was like native of the nearest bigger town. So they had a lot of family in the area, but they had been traveling a bit and were kind of coming back home.
But again, that's about what you want as the owner to happen, because we had people that could have come from other areas, and we decided that our real goal was to be in the region with people from the region. So it wasn't just that small area, but the region. So they had some support outside of the commons and other farmers. So the best of both worlds, really.
I think we have time for one more question, or if anyone wants to, talk on any of the other subjects that have come up tonight for a couple minutes. Oh, Lori, go ahead.
I guess on the question of the C25, which I just Googled here for really the first time, could you also donate to it? I mean, is it a IRS recognized, nonprofit? Sam, like, would you know, can you donate to it?
Yeah, right, Christina?
Yeah, I'll just jump in here. So the 501c25 is a subsidiary entity of the parent 501c3s. And so all donations, including land, come in through that parent 501c3, and then the donor receives the tax deduction through that, and then it is funneled straight into that 501c25.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I feel less bad for not having memorized that answer.
Another way to think about it too is that really that C25 is really like in the commercial world, a leasing overseer, just to think about it like that.
I would also like to just jump in and just share a thought or reflection that I've been thinking about this. It is so difficult right now with land prices being so exorbitantly high and the land access being such a huge hurdle and barrier for incoming farmers. And to think that market price is a value that is what is needed is so often not the case. There are times and places when people do need market value for land, but market value is astronomical and has appreciated by over 40% per decade. And so most people don't actually need market price for their land. For instance, Annie and Jay have given an agreement that they're donating a significant portion of the land, and instead of charging full price to the Farmers Land Trust, they are gifting $150,000 worth of the land value plus their business valued at over $100,000, and that's a donation and gift to the Farmers Land Trust. And then we are actively fundraising to purchase the rest. And so, would appreciate a donation from everyone here also. But to say that there are ways to equitably transition from land, that you get the amount that you need to retire with dignity, but that you are also paving a legacy forward for the future and honoring not just the land, but also the community and people who have yet to come.
All right. Thank you so much, Christina and Annie and all of our panelists for being here and like helping guide this conversation and support this conversation this evening. And I really just appreciate everyone who, is here today and has joined us in this space. I went ahead and put the link to our evaluation here in the chat. We also have a QR code here if you would like to use that to access that evaluation as well. As a nonprofit, we rely on funders to keep our programs going, and to keep those funds, we have to give back some data and feedback about what those funds are being used for. So if you feel so inclined to fill out that evaluation, we really appreciate it. But before we get going, there's that. You don't have to fill it out right now. You can fill it out after the fact. And I can give one moment for people who want to use this QR code. I'll get you in just one second, Annie here. All right, Mo, do you want to switch to the next slide here? Before we let you go, I just want to thank our funders who make the HOP program possible, and they're the reason we're able to host these events. And so here is our shout out to them. You want to go ahead and take a look at all of those, but these are the people who fund the HOP program.